Hello and welcome. This is Angie with thecountrychiccottage.net. So we have another Cricut video for you today. So today we're going to talk about leather. We're going to talk about using the deboss and the Engrave tips. So we've already talked about both of these tips and looked at each one individually. Now we're going to look at them together. We're going to compare the deboss with the Engrave on leather and actually make a project today. So I'm actually making this key chain, and you might not be able to tell from there, but it's actually engraved with a monogram. And yes, I said engraved because this is actually my favorite version. But let's look at how you use both the deboss and the engraved tip on leather. And then I'm going to use it both with regular dry leather just straight out of the package, and then I'm going to wet some and do it that way as well to kind of show the differences there. So basically wet leather is more pliable and you can work it more, but there are some drawbacks when it comes to the Cricut machine. So let's look at both tips as well as the leather both ways. So here's a look at my mat. I've actually already cut the pieces out of this one, but I just want to talk a little bit about applying the leather. So when you put the leather on the mat, you're going to need a strong grip mat, and then you're really going to need to use your brayer and bray it down, and then tape all around the outside surfaces. Now the mat itself, you can probably see over here where I've been cutting some leather, but I'm going to peel up some of this. The mat itself, so you have to do the leather, if you're going to deboss or engrave, you have to do the leather face up. That means the back of the leather is really going to stick to your mat, and your mat will have a very short life. So you may want to factor that cost in when you're thinking about doing debossed or engraved leather projects. So this is the deboss tip, and you can see it has a small round ball on the end, versus the engraving tip, which has this larger pointed piece on the end. So when I did the same project with both of those tips. So this one used the deboss tip, this one the engraved tip. So this is genuine leather, and it was dry when I put it on my mat, so I didn't wet it at all. And you can see the engraving pretty well, and I think you can see the deboss, but just barely. So the engraving is definitely deeper. The deboss has a fairly cool effect, but you really have to turn it in the light to see it. So I really like the engraving a little bit better. Now, when you put the dry leather down on your mat, it's even worse. So it sticks even worse to the mat. So that's beneficial in one way because it holds the leather in place as it does the deboss, the engraving, and the cutting. But it also sticks worse when you peel it back, so the mat life will not be as long. Now, I did wet some leather and did the same two pieces. So this is deboss on dry, and this is deboss on wet. And you may not even be able to see it on the wet. So the wet doesn't stick as well, and it didn't even deboss as well. I can barely see where it ran over the surface. So I definitely don't recommend the deboss tip on wet leather. The engraving tip, however, does actually go deeper than the engraving tip on the dry leather, so it goes deeper on the wet. However, you may notice some difference in these cuts. So you see there's kind of a difference between the two pieces. That's because the wet leather doesn't stick as well to the mat, and so it is actually bunching up as it's dragging across the piece, and it's not getting the full engraving. So this is what it's supposed to look like. This is what it looks like because the leather bunched up as it was dragging through. So I also did not like the engraving on the wet leather. So definitely for me, it's engraving on dry leather all the way. I think that is definitely the way to go with the Cricut Maker. Now let's make this piece into a fun keychain. So now to turn this into a keychain, you'll need the keychain itself, a rivet, the rivet tool, and a hammer, and then something to punch the hole. Now I'm going to use a crop-a-dile, but you could definitely use a leather tool or a punch, just anything to punch the hole in the leather. So the first thing we're going to do is just fold it over, and then I'm going to use the small side of the crop-a-dile. So if you've ever used your crop-a-dile, there's a small and a large punch, and I'm going to use the smaller of the two. And then I'm going to punch a hole through both pieces. And then we'll put the keyring in there. And then this is a small rivet. We'll just put that
through one side and put the cap on the opposite side, push it down till it clicks, and then we're going to put this on this piece, the rivet itself, and then the concave portion of the tool there. And it actually works better if I hold this kind of up and level, so I'm going to put something under that and then hammer down. Now that the rivet's on there, your keychain is complete and engraved with your monogram. Alright, so this is the deboss tip again. So this is the one where I did the leather dry. This is where I wet the leather. Now I wet it quite a bit, so I thought, what if I just barely wet the leather? So this is the third where I just barely wet the leather, and I didn't actually even bother cutting the project out, just as an experiment. So, I mean, it might be a little different, but to me it's similar to the dry in depth. It might be a little bit deeper. I don't know if it's enough difference in real life to warrant even wetting the leather, but you could try it just a little bit wet if you really wanted that deboss look, just to get a little bit deeper, but it's still going to be very hard to see in person or on camera, so it's going to be very hard to see. Then same thing with the engraving tip. So this one's dry, this one was really wet, and this one is actually just a little bit wet. So I'm going to remove the really wet one because it didn't work, as we talked about. So the barely wet one and the dry one, I can't really tell a lot of difference even in person. This barely wet might be a little bit cleaner, but that would be being really picky. So I think both are equally the same, but I mean, you can I just brushed it with the sponge a couple times. You can definitely try that to get a little bit of a cleaner engrave and see if it works a little bit better for you. And I'm going to call it a little bit better. I don't know if it would actually be worth the time, but when you barely wet the leather, it does still stick to the mat really well. So put it on your mat first, tape it down really well along the sides, and then brush it a couple of times with a sponge to just get it barely wet, and then do your engrave or deboss and try that for a little bit better of an effect on your leather. So the clear winner for me was the engraving tip on dry leather, and I went ahead and made my keychain with that. So that for me is the best option when you're working with your Cricut Maker. So be sure to pick up the knife blade. I feel like it's the best for cutting the leather, and the engrave tip if you want to actually put a design on your leather before cutting it. So this is a Cricut Maker project only. The knife blade and the engrave tip are only for the Maker. So if you don't have one, be sure to pick one up. Now, if you want to see more about the engraving tip or the deboss tip, look for a link for both of those videos in the description below. You'll also want to join our Facebook group. We have tons of different ideas. We share things, and you can ask your questions there as well. If you love this video, give us a thumbs up. If you have any questions about anything we've done today, how we made the keychain, the engraving tip, the deboss tip, how they work on leather, please ask those in the comment section below. Can't find any of the links I talked about? Ask in the comment section below as well. I'll be happy to get to those as soon as I can. So thank you all so much for joining me today, and I'll be back next week with another video. Thanks, bye.